So this is what you look like inside?
I have never been allowed in here before. This must be where I was born. Look at all the Endos. They're all the same.
Freddy! Freddy? Are you okay?
What if I am not the first Glamrock Freddy?
Please be functional.
Are there more of me at other pizzerias? If I am mass-produced, am I still art?
Welcome back, everyone. I'm Bon Jonesy, and it seems you have missed something important in Ruin, so it's up to me to prove it. In this series of mine spanning 10 episodes each, I'll not just reveal some interesting things in Ruin, but I'll prove its validity. And believe me, Ruin is hiding some interesting revelations about the lore and much, much more. From the title of the video, I'm sure some of you are confused, but for those new or can't remember, I've proven that Princess Quest isn't canon by Vanny being in the Ruin Pizzaplex and Glitchtrap's continuing existence in the network. But with that ending not being canon, the only ending in which Freddy is noticeably detached from his body, Prototype Freddy's existence in Ruin becomes a big question mark in place of seemingly no easy answers as to how and why. Yet the answers I've managed to find are surprising. But wait, how do I know Prototype and Glamrock Freddy aren't the same character? Just because Princess Quest isn't canon doesn't mean there's now another Freddy. What if something happened to Freddy after the different endings? This would typically be the point where I dive into the various outcomes of Security Breach 6 endings, explaining why Prototype can't be a Freddy from any one of them. But Steel Wool did us all a solid and gave us crucial clues to show both that Freddy didn't become Prototype and that they're two separate characters. The first and most obvious clue is the Prototype label on his right foot endo casing. A common argument suggests that this label was always on Freddy's foot in Security Breach, but went unnoticed due to being covered by paint that wore off and ruined. However, one thing you should keep in mind is that the Glamrock endo casing is made from colored material, as opposed to being material that's painted over, as the insides of the casing are the same as the outside. Paint itself can be scrubbed or scratched off with hard surfaces, maybe not entirely, but significantly. The label is located on the bottom of the foot, which experiences the most friction of any body part as it constantly interacts with various surfaces to support the body. Freddy, in Security Breach, is probably more active than ever, continually moving around the Pizzaplex to help Gregory survive the night. If the label had been painted over under Freddy's foot, it would have been at least partially revealed by the time of Roxy's upgrade, and certainly by the final upgrade. Yet there's no hint of the label's existence, even when Freddy is at his most withered. The Prototype label is clearly visible and almost pristine, suggesting that it's part of the casing material itself and was never painted over. The last clue is the most crucial one, subtly hidden and easily overlooked if you haven't played Security Breach in a while, and is seen during Prototype's jump scare. It's that, the crumpled green gift box and Prototype's stomach hatch. This, not the label, reveals that Prototype is not our Freddy from Security Breach, and that regardless of which ending is canon, Freddy didn't become Prototype between the two games, as the key lies in what happened at the very start of Security Breach.
Isn't there some other way for you to communicate with me besides talking so loudly?
Take this. It is a novelty Freddy Fast Watch.
The gift box belonging to our Freddy is distinctly Freddy themed, unlike Prototype's plain green one. In Security Breach, Freddy already gave his gift box to Gregory, leaving his stomach hatch empty throughout all endings. Since Prototype still has a gift box in his stomach, it means that this Freddy never gave his gift box away before Ruin. The box is crumbled and pinned by rebar in his stomach hatch, suggesting it was there when he was shattered, not added later. And since the other Ruin Glamrocks are just more withered versions of their shattered state, with no apparent attempts made to restore them to their previous presentable look, we know that the earthquake that led to Fazbear Entertainment tearing down and reconstruction of Pizzaplex in Ruin happened immediately after Security Breach, meaning Prototype had to have been shattered during or before a security breach. So if this Freddy has the word Prototype engraved into his right foot endo casing with no effort to hide it, and he still has a gift box in his stomach hatch when he got shattered, then he's not our Freddy. Alright, now that we know that Prototype Freddy is a completely different character, let's start by clarifying a common misconception in the fandom about him. He's disconnected from the network. Of course, this stems from the belief that Prototype is our Freddy from Security Breach, but he's not, on both accounts. Prototype can see Cassie, even better than Roxy, who, shattered and ruined, struggles to locate Gregory and Cassie near her. But Prototype, despite lacking a head, always knows Cassie's precise location when she removes the security mask, effortlessly tracking her even as she moves from room to room. But why is that? It's because Prototype Freddy is using the network itself as his eyes. Among the graffiti seen in Fazbear, which by their purple and yellow color scheme let us know they're all from Vanny, some of them actually hint at Prototype doing this. After exiting the vent and getting into Superstar Lounge, you'll come across Vanny's final graffiti in Fazbear, which is a message in the form of "He doesn't see you." This message is referring to Prototype Freddy because the graffiti is a continuation of the ones in the vent, which was all Vanny's commentary about our Freddy with a missing head. Now, what makes this last graffiti here special, and a hint, is that it changes once you put on the security mask, as purple pixelated blotches, the same ones I noted in my Glitch Trap episode as coming from the Princess Quest 3 arcade cabinet in Vanny's room, covers the doesn't and alters the graffiti to say, "He see you." Well, you can only know that he sees you while you're in the AR world. You're in the AR world because you're using the security mask, a virtual, augmented neural network integration unit. You see, he see you in the network. Freddy in Security Breach was never not connected to the Pizzaplex network. In fact, he proves this with crystal clarity when he flat out reads the messages you find and get on Gregory's Fazwatch.
According to that message, one of the staff bots brought the key to the Superstar Theater. The entrance is located in the daycare. Gregory, did you read that message? It said there is a bag of Monty mystery mix behind the bowling alley. Chica goes cuckoo for Monty mystery mix.
Glitch Trap and Burn Trap further drives this point home, as he can remotely hack into Freddy during his boss fight, something he wouldn't have been capable of if both he and Freddy weren't connected to the same network. Freddy was only disconnected from the main network of the Pizzaplex, which doesn't include the other Pizzaplex sub-networks like the Vanny network that the security mask uses, a mask that you can use to hide yourself from the sight of those connected to the network, like the endoskeletons, who move around freely instead of doing their best weaving angel imitation when it's off, implying that all endos are connected to the network. The Glamrocks, who we know are connected to the network because of the security protocols, are also affected by the mask trick as they don't actually see you while you're wearing it. The reason they move towards you in the AR world is because Mixes had hijacked the security protocols, as I noted in the Mixes episode. With the security protocols under his control, Mixes leads the Glamrocks to your general location. The only ones who can see you with the mask on are digital entities like Mixes and Glitch Trap, the mini Music Man / wind-up Music Man, whose behavior never changes whether you have the mask on or off, meaning they aren't connected to the Pizzaplex network at all, and Roxy and the daycare attendant. Both of them are the only animatronics that actually react and interact as if they can see Cassie while she's wearing the security mask, while being connected to the networks themselves. Whether or not this is because they're connected to sources outside the Pizzaplex network is unclear. But all this to say, it makes the moment when you put on the mask and Prototype disappears from your sight in the AR world stand out like a black sheep among the flock, as no other animatronic does this in the ruin. So why does this happen? The fact that putting on the mask affects Prototype at all means he is connected to the network, yet his complete disappearance suggests that something more is at play compared to the other animatronics. One thing that comes to mind that vanishes as Prototype does in the AR world is the digital object I brought up in episode 3. Does this mean that he's not actually real? Nope. In the same episode, I delve into the AR inhibitors, which are the key to understanding whether or not what Cassie sees is 100% real. Before approaching Prototype after taking an additional white gate, a no-mask symbol appears in the bottom left corner of the screen. It remains on screen during the encounter and the following chase until the end of that sequence, where you deactivate an active AR inhibitor, meaning Cassie has been in his range the whole time after you exit the digital white gate, proving, without a doubt, that Prototype Freddy is 100% real. But if he's real and connected to the network, why does he vanish in the AR world? It all comes back to how Prototype can see Cassie. If Prototype relies on the network to be his eyes, simply integrating Cassie into the network to avoid his detection is not going to cut it, as she'll only be more visible to him. However, if Cassie integrated herself into a separate network from Prototype's, say a sub-network, Prototype will be as blind to her presence as she would be to his. Just as Freddy shows us in Security Breach, you can be disconnected from Pizzaplex network while still being able to access the various other networks. So by Security Mesh shifting Cassie into the Vanny network and out of sight of Prototype's network, it renders them both as invisible to each other. Now I'm sure there's only one question on everyone's mind. Where did he come from? He had to have been in the Pizzaplex during Security Breach, as Fazbear Entertainment didn't bring any new animatronics or bots in the ruined Pizzaplex. So again, where did he come from? To my surprise and joy, other theorists had came to the same conclusion about Prototype's origins long before I did, but let me explain how I got there. One detail that caught my eye and that I mentioned earlier is the rebar piercing Prototype's body. From his shoulder down to his thigh, a large amount of rebar can be seen sticking out and in from all sides of him. This made me wonder if there was a location in Security Breach where Prototype could have been that would explain them. As I hopped through my memories of the game, I recall a place that looked rather ruined and filled with trash and garbage. The Pizzaplex sewers. When I looked more closely at that area, I found that rebars were indeed scattered throughout nearly every section of this area. Ruin even hints at this being where Prototype was by Vanny, as in that same place where you find out that Roxy's the last node, you'll find a table with the core 4 Glamrock plushies sitting on it. The plushies reflect the same damage that the shattered, not the ruined Glamrocks have, as the Chica plushie still has her left arm, and the left side of Monty's fleshy face is damaged. The exception is the Freddy plushie, which represents Prototype, as all official representations of Shadow Freddy still have his head, which itself is damaged. Vanny is the only person in the ruined Pizzaplex who has the time and knowledge of the shattered Glamrocks and Prototype to modify their plushies after them. But the hint for Prototype's origins lie in the way Freddy's plushie is distinctly sectioned off from the rest by being on a serving tray. While serving trays are typically used to carry food from the kitchen, they're also used by waiters to carry leftover trash and waste to be disposed of. If Prototype was hidden in a Security Breach, then the sewers of the Pizzaplex would be the perfect area for him to be hidden until his appearance in ruin. And from what the 5th Tales book says regarding the Pizzaplex sewers, I was spot on in my deduction. In Bobby Dodge Part 2, a character in that story who transverses the Pizzaplex sewers refers to it as a graveyard of damaged and discarded animatronics, a place where the old and useless were left to languish. A shattered Prototype of our leading man certainly fits that description of being old and damaged. The sewer is a massive area for him to be dumped into and be unseen by us and Gregory during Security Breach, as the tunnels, the walls, and even parts of the ceiling are filled with parts, metal, junk, and even the remains of stat bots. Yet, this is where I found myself confused when I first started to connect the clues together for Prototype being a different Glamrock Freddy, and perhaps you are too. I was under the impression that our Freddy was the first version of Glamrock Freddy in the Pizzaplex since its grand opening. I mean, he misses Bonnie, and his refusal to visit Bonnie Ball implies that he indeed knew and befriended Bonnie, who has been missing for a long time as a Pizzaplex. But that's not proof of our Freddy being the very first of him. as we don't have an exact timeline between the Pizzaplex grand opening and Bonnie's decommissioning. All that we know is that the Pizzaplex has been open for years before the events of Security Breach. But there are clues in that game that hint towards Freddy, or even the other Glamrocks we encounter not being the first of themselves in the Pizzaplex, and that there might indeed be more.
I have never been allowed in here before. This must be where I was born. Look at all the Endos. They're all the same. Have I always been a Freddy? Am I Monty with a different shell? What if I am not the first Glamrock Freddy? Are there more of me at other pizzerias? Do we all feel the same? Am I special? If I am mass-produced, am I still art?
If you're part of this, you're scrap. Monty will run the shows until parts and service can slap your casing on the new Endo.
Although anxious questions from an animatronic bear experiencing an existential crisis is not exactly proof of there being a past version of himself, it is proof, however, that Fazbear Entertainment doesn't transfer the memory database of any of the old discarded Glamrocks into the new ones. So Glamrock Freddy himself wouldn't have Prototype's memories, or even knowledge of his existence in the Pizzaplex unless someone informed him, confirming that our Freddy is truly the same Freddy that befriended Bonnie before his mysterious decommissioning. Vanessa's dialogue, on the other hand, tells us that Fazbear Entertainment is capable and willing to replace the Glamrocks if the current version of them get too troublesome or damaged, and that it takes a while before a replacement is ready, as we can deduce by the show's part. This explains why the Glamrocks are still in the ruined Pizzaplex after Security Breach, which by Cassie calling it an old place now in ruin, suggests it has been at least a year or a half since then, as Gregory sounds the same, and the Pizzaplex doesn't appear as abandoned as something longer than a year. It also explains why Fazbear Entertainment hasn't taken them out to repair them. They're likely all getting replaced in the future when they reopen the Pizzaplex. But digging into the cut content of Security Breach for other clues reveals more, as Freddy has some cut dialogue specifically talking about previous versions of himself. Oh, and as always, I am not using cut content as proof, but instead using it to suggest that the idea of it is still possible within the games.
I hear what some guests say about me. Bad things happened in the past. But that was not me. Those were older models. Flawed. I would never hurt anyone. You know that, right?
So the concept of a previous version of Freddy was initially considered for Security Breach, but ultimately cut. Yet in Ruin, the idea has been refitted back into canon now that we know that Prototype is not our Freddy, that Fazbear Entertainment will replace any damaged or problematic Glamrocks, and that Prototype was hidden away in the vast sewers of the Pizzaplex. Speaking of, returning to that Tales book story, the main character had even come across a previous version of Glamrock Chica down there. So not only is it confirmed that there are past versions of the Glamrocks hidden down there, but the fact that Chica can still move means that those old and discarded Glamrocks are still somewhat functional, which means they can still be useful for the villains. But why is there a prototype of Glamrock Freddy in the Pizzaplex in the first place? Shouldn't such a thing have been kept at some testing facility before the opening of the Pizzaplex? But it's on this line of thinking that I recall a Tales book epilogue, the first one to be exact, from Lally's game, which introduces the mimic to the FNAF universe, but also describes the arrival of the Glamrocks at the Pizzaplex. Something important about this epilogue is that it takes place during the renovations at Freddy Fazbear Pizza Place, aka the FNAF 6 pizzeria in the sinkhole, and even hints about construction happening above it, which would mean the construction at Freddy Fazbear Mega Pizzaplex, placing this story shortly after the events of Help Wanted. So when the story suddenly features the mimic being delivered alongside friendly looking, brand new animatronics, it confirms that these were not just the Glamrocks, but the very first Glamrocks of the Pizzaplex. And if there was any way a prototype of Freddy came to the Pizzaplex, he would have been alongside the very first set of Glamrocks the Pizzaplex ever had. This might even suggest that all of the first Glamrocks were prototypes before they got replaced, leading to the question of why did they all get replaced? Prototype's aggressive behavior towards Cassie, a human customer, hints at affection, But this doesn't align with the timeline. Prototype had to have been scrapped pretty early in the Pizzaplex life, as our Freddy had to befriend Bonnie, who also gets scrapped early in the Pizzaplex life. And the earliest known Pizzaplex network infection happens in the Tales book story, The Storyteller, which does make mention of Bonnie among the affected Glamrocks, including a yellow Glamrock Chica, meaning this is really early in the Pizzaplex life. Yet here, the infected Glamrock Freddy tries to snatch a classic Freddy plushie from a child, but when the mother swats him away, he lets go and stops to a corner to cry. A far cry from the aggression and deadliness displayed by Prototype in Ruin. Furthermore, Vanny labels Prototype a bad bear, which by how we find him twisted and bent on a pile of trash parts and disassembled staff bots, all under a fallen piece of Fazbear's catwalk, suggests that she could manipulate him like she does with the other infected Glamrocks after retrieving him from the sewers, and dealt with him before Ruin. Further solidifying that Prototype's behavior is not the result of him being infected. So, if not infected, why is Prototype so aggressive? This is where Freddy's cut remarks about older models being flawed come back into this. You see, the 4th Tales book epilogue reveals that there are 2 distinct models of the Mimic endoskeleton, distinguished as Mimic Models 1 and 2. Despite what you might think, the story makes it clear that these Mimic models resemble the Mimic, so why am I bringing it up then? In the 1st Tales book epilogue, it's revealed that the first, possibly all Prototypes, Glamrocks arrive at the Pizzaplex alongside the Mimic, who's described as having a shiny head and a body looked to have survived a fire, implying that the shiny head was not originally part of the body and that it was fixed before coming to the Pizzaplex. Since it was in the custody of the new Fazbear Entertainment, it means they fixed it, which in turn suggests they have access to the Mimic's blueprints, meaning they can make more of them and even improve upon the original design and create brand new animatronics for the new Pizzaplex. That's right, the Glamrock Endos are an advanced redesign of the Mimic models. In Security Breach, the blueprints label them as NGT Endos, New Generation Endos, meaning they are the next iteration of an older model, and as the 4th epilogue tells us, the Mimic models feature retractable and expandable limbs and contracting torsos. Which guess what? The NGT Endos all have, as a look between Freddy's and Monty's endoskeleton compared to Chica's and Roxy's show you that the girls have shorter limbs and contracting torsos, but the same base endoskeletons, which explains why we never see a female variant of the NGT Endos. These Endos are unisex in design. As for the orange eyes, due to the game's lighting, it's hard to tell if the Endo's eyes are actually glowing red or orange. Regardless, these Endos possess the same capabilities as the old Mimic models, including learning by mimicking what they see, 100% confirming they are indeed the current generation of the Mimic models, with the Glamrocks being the Mimic's successors. So any prototype of the NGT Endos will be much closer to the original models in design and programming, which by Prototype's flexibility and ability to control his limbs despite being in unnatural positions, and his ability to use the network as his eyes to track things unlike the other Glamrocks, but just like the original Mimic, Prototype Glamrock Freddy could be renamed as Mimic Glamrock Freddy. With all that said, Vanny's reason for retrieving him from the sewers remains unclear, but it's almost a given that Prototype is another piece on the board for Glitchtrap to use in the ill-boding future of FNAF.